History tells the story of the world and of our lives. Sometimes that history goes bump in the night. Broadcasting from the center of oddity and the supernatural in Central Florida, it's the History Goes Bump podcast.
Hello, you spooktacular people. Welcome to History Goes Bump Redux. I am your host, Diane.
And this is Kelly.
Kelly, on this Redux, we're going back to the Monte Cristo Homestead, which is found in New South Wales in Australia. We did this one back in, I think, 2015.
Ah.
And we had one of our young listeners join us, Freya, on that episode. She, of course, has grown up now and gone off to live her life and do all kinds of other things. But we thought we would look back at this location, and we have some more updated experiences that people have had, and we've expanded the history some more because there's more that's been found out about the place.
Looking forward to bringing this to the listeners.
Are you ready to go back?
I'm ready. The Monte Cristo Homestead is located in Junee, New South Wales in Australia. This Victorian-era home sat on the top of a hill overlooking the town that the owner helped found. The house knew success and it knew tragedy. The beautiful exterior is deceptive as the interior holds many haunts. Most people claim that this is the most haunted house in Australia. Join us as we share the history and hauntings of the Monte Cristo Homestead.
The name Junee is derived from the Aboriginal word for frog. The Wiradjuri were hunter-fisher-gatherers that lived in the area. Leopold de Salis was one of the first Europeans to travel here, and he set up agriculture in the area and helped establish the town, which opened its first post office in 1862. By 1866, the population of Junee was big number 12.
Oh my.
You don't need a lot as long as you got a post office. The main South Line Railway had a line that was built 5 miles outside of Junee, and this led to expansion of the town. Junee became an important stop on the line, and the town was moved closer to the railway with a new post office opening. Government was formed in 1886, and a courthouse was built in 1890.
Christopher William Crawley was born in 1841 in Liverpool, New South Wales. He moved to Tumut when he was young, and he lived there until he was 19 years old, and he went to Adelong to work for a man named A. Watson. Crawley worked for that man for 9 years, and then he went off on his own to work on the Murrumbidgee River. In 1876, he acquired a 400-acre plot of land and then another 120-acre area in what would become Junee. At this point, he had married Elizabeth Carr in 1862. The Crawleys had 4 daughters and 3 sons. The girls were Helen Ann, known as Lillian, Lydia Blanche, Florence Agnes, and Angela Christina, known as Pidge.
I like that nickname.
I like it too. It's very cute. All of them went to the best schools and were musically talented. Lillian was an accomplished pianist, and she composed the Scotia Scotiche in 1895 for a ball at Government House and dedicated it to Lady Dunbar. The boys were Mervyn Marmaduke, Aubrey Clarence, and Alphonse Hillary, and they played music as well. Mervyn was a large landowner in Queensland and was nicknamed the Pioneer of Queensland. Aubrey became a doctor, and Alphonse became a solicitor who practiced law for 62 years.
Yeah, apparently he made a record with that.
That's quite a long career. The family struggled at farming for several years and lived in a slab hut. The Great Southern Railway line came to the area in 1878, and Crawley decided to buy a license so that he could build and run the Railway Hotel. He built it across from where the railway station was going to open. The railroad brought agricultural trade and tourists, and this brought Crawley wealth. He sold plots of land and helped found Junee. He donated parcels of land to build a church and other community projects.
Crowley decided that it was time to build his family a bigger home, and he did just that in 1885. This would be the beautiful late Victorian two-story home that still stands today. The family's original small brick cottage was turned into the servants' quarters. The Victorian was built with sandstone bricks fired on the property, and the downstairs had 18-inch thick walls and the upper floor had 8-inch thick walls. There was beautiful woodwork and stained glass windows. Both levels of the house had large wraparound verandas bordered with colorful cast iron lattice. And if you guys have seen pictures of this house, that is what catches your eye, is that cast iron lattice. It is gorgeous.
I would imagine.
The family hosted balls and played tennis on the front lawn. There seems to have been another side to the Crowleys that few on the outside of the house knew anything about. While many people on the outside of the house saw the family as generous, many servants later reported harsh mistreatment at the hands of their employers, and many deaths occurred in the house. A maid was pushed or jumped off the balcony, a woman died in labor, a stable boy burnt to death, and a nanny threw a little girl down the stairs, although she claimed she was pushed out of her arms by an unseen force. Perhaps most disturbingly, the housekeeper's mentally disabled son was kept locked up in the outhouse, or the dairy, sources vary, for 30 years.
Oh my word. Mr. Crowley died in 1910 from heart failure, secondary to blood poisoning from an infected carbuncle on his neck. His starched high collars aggravated the wound. After this, Mrs. Crowley, possibly ostracized from the community after her husband's death because of her suspected Aboriginal heritage, only left the house twice until her death 23 years later in 1933 from a burst appendix at the age of 91.
Can you imagine just being in your house for 23 years and leaving for only 2 days?
No.
Talk about stir crazy.
She converted the upstairs box room into her private chapel. The house remained in the family until 1948, when the last of the Crowleys vacated and Monte Cristo fell into disrepair and was vandalized. A documentary film claims that the house served as a boarding house for a while and a hospital during World War II, so we're not sure if the family had moved out and allowed that use or what. In 1961, the caretaker, Jack Simpson, was shot dead by a local boy who had been influenced by the movie Psycho, adding to the horrifying lore of the house. And he apparently scrawled, "Die, Jack, ha ha," onto a door.
And it's still there today. You can see that scrawling. And I don't know why he would be influenced by the movie Psycho, because in that movie, it's actually the caretaker of an establishment, or the innkeeper, who does the killing of people who are coming to stay there. And it's with a knife, not a gun. So
Right.
The property was purchased by Reginald and Olive Ryan in 1963, who carefully restored the building while raising their 5 children there. Reg was dedicated to Monte Cristo, spooky history and all, and worked tirelessly on its restoration and development until his death in 2014. He once joked that he would be the next ghost to appear in the house, and that may be true now. The homestead is open for house tours, dinners, overnight stays, and of course, ghost tours. Regular hours are Saturdays and Sundays from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. The homestead features a carriage collection, a wheelwright shop, and lots of antiques. And along with restoring the house, Reg restored those carriages.
Oh, how amazing.
Yeah, it's really cool. I've gotten to see this documentary that I was talking about. We'll talk about that again a little bit later, but they did some filming in there, and so you get to see all the carriages and stuff. It's very cool.
The paranormal activity in the house is said to be extreme, with everything from ghostly figures to animal mutilation on record. There are several ghosts here. One of them is connected to the baby that died on the stairs. In 1917, Christopher and Elizabeth Crowley's granddaughter was the baby that died. It was thought a nursemaid had dropped the baby, but she claimed that a ghost had grabbed the baby out of her hands and threw it down the stairs. That was at least one version of the story. Another story had the nursemaid claiming she was pushed by a spirit, and so she ended up dropping the baby as she fell. Children get upset when they get near the stairs, and visitors have claimed to be pushed on the stairs.
That's a very common thing for people to get pushed on those stairs. Morris, a young stable boy, known for sleeping in and slacking off, didn't feel well one day. He told his master at Monte Cristo Homestead that he was sick. His master didn't believe that he was ill, so he thought he'd teach him a lesson about sleeping in by setting Morris's straw mattress on fire, thinking Morris would jump up and get to work. Unfortunately, the stable master was wrong. Morris burned to death in his bed. Visitors claim to still hear his disembodied screams to this day. Who sets a mattress on fire?
Good grief, how terrible.
And especially straw. That thing probably went up in like 2 seconds.
I'm sure. Christopher Crawley was rumored to have had sexual relations with several Monte Cristo Homestead staff members, including 2 maids that became pregnant. One of them committed suicide by jumping from a balcony. She hit the stairs and was instantly killed. Another maid had to clean up the blood, and she left a bleach rag sitting too long on the stairs, and there are still bleached areas of those stairs today. Her ghost haunts the veranda. The second maid gave birth to a son that she named Harold. Christopher Crawley wanders the house, occasionally seen but never scaring visitors. His wife, though, Elizabeth Crawley, is known to scare visitors by touching them with an icy cold hand, particularly anyone who doesn't display proper manners. Keep those elbows off the table.
No kidding. The son, Harold, was hit by a coach on the property as a young boy and sustained a severe head injury. As a result of the accident and the subsequent brain trauma, Harold exhibited uncontrollable aggression and could no longer care for himself. He was chained inside an outbuilding for over 30 years, screaming and howling daily, which gave rise to local children believing a monster was trapped on the grounds. Authorities eventually found him as an adult and moved him to an asylum where he later died. Harold haunts the property, and visitors have heard his chains rattling, and some have claimed to hear his disembodied screams as well. And whatever they locked his chains to are still in that outbuilding as well.
Oh my.
His mother also passed away in this building, and Harold was found grieving next to her. No further information was given on this, so Kelly, I'm not sure, was she like in there visiting him and then died, or did he help unalive her? She died from something else? I don't know.
Did he kill her, you mean?
That's what I'm wondering. I was trying to be nice about it.
Yeah, well.
And now a little break for a word about one of our sponsors.
And the caretaker who was killed in 1961 was killed in this building as well. And that's where the saying about, die Jack has been scrawled on the wall. So this could be the most haunted spot on the property.
The Ryans experienced some horrifying stuff when it came to their animals. They came home one night to find all of their chickens strangled to death. In a similar incident, they discovered a pet parrot choked to death in its cage. In yet another incident, an entire litter of kittens was brutally killed. No one really knows who may be at work here. There are those that claim an animal-killing spirit wanders the place. The couple had their first spooky experience a few days after moving in. Coming back up the driveway to the house after dark, Reg and Olive found the entire house blazing with light from the inside, as though every light were turned on, even though electricity hadn't yet been connected to the house.
I saw somebody debunking this online, just saying, well, they probably forgot that they'd left the lights on or something like that, or they were seeing
no electricity.
lights reflecting from somewhere else. There's no neighbor's house that's right next to this that could be reflecting the lights. And yes, there's no electricity hooked up. So no, it's not possible for the lights to be on.
As they neared the house, all light was suddenly extinguished. Feelings of sadness, sickness, or even not being able to breathe are common in certain rooms. Apparitions of Mr. Crawley are common, but Mrs. Crawley seems to be more demanding of the pair, making her presence known around the house, but particularly in the converted chapel.
Which is basically where she spent most of the end of her life, was in that chapel. And so now, of course, when they go in, the Ryans have tried to be as nice and welcoming and respectful to her as they can. So they always, talk to her, ask her about changing things, inviting her to be a part of stuff. And so they don't get the kind of treatment that some other people might be getting. And they have really run with this. Like when you walk into the house, it's got a creepy vibe to it because they've set it up to have a creepy vibe.
That's cool.
Yeah. One of the Ryans' daughters went to check on her little brother Lawrence, who was sleeping one night, and when she entered the room, she found an elderly man in what she described as old-fashioned clothes standing at the end of his bed. She raced off to find her parents and told them that a strange man was in the house. A search was conducted, and no man was found. Lawrence later said when he was an adult, "I always felt like someone was watching me in that room." It didn't leave him scarred, as Lawrence now leads the ghost tours in the house.
Oh.
So it's basically him and his mother Olive that now take care of the house and do the touring and stuff. And for those outside of Australia, Lawrence was somewhat like Evel Knievel
Really?
and was a stunt rider known as Lawrence Legend.
Oh, how cool.
He currently holds the most world and Australian records of any Australian jumper.
Wow.
He's done some crazy stuff, and they actually did some scenes for this documentary as well.
Nice. Reg's nephew and his wife once stayed at the property and had a scare on a late-night search for the bathroom. A woman in white, there's always one,
Of course there is.
materialized on the landing before them and told them, "Don't worry, it will be all right," before disappearing.
If you can't find the restroom, it is not going to be all
I was
right.
going to say, don't worry, you won't poop your pants yet. The bed in which the young woman died in labor is the only original bed on the property and is used in a guest room. Creepy in itself.
Mhm.
Where some wake up feeling the residual pains of labor.
Yikes.
No, thank you.
Nobody wants that.
Reg Ryan seems to have kept his promise of returning to his beloved homestead. He's sometimes seen in the old coach house, where he was working on restoring the Crawleys' coaches, and the family believe he is still watching over them.
The following experience comes from the Castle of Spirits website. As we moved along through the old coaches, Mike, Eoghan, and myself suddenly had the uncanny experience of feeling that something, not so good, was above our heads. We could see a large loft above with a ladder leading up to it, and Mike took it upon himself to go to the ladder and start to climb up to the loft to explore what was up there. We moved aside so as to not be underneath the loft and underneath the entity above us, and watched as Mike was suddenly overcome by a force pushing him upwards. He allowed himself to be pushed up the stairs and was horrified to find a large open window upstairs with no barriers. He suddenly realized that this entity was pushing him towards the open window, and we all shouted for him to come down the stairs immediately. Mike managed to return to the ladder, but was amazed by the pushing force that he was subjected to. At the same time, Mark Ferguson suddenly cried out and jumped into the middle of our small group. He practically climbed on top of me, and you could see that he was quite terrified. He told how he was standing slightly aside from us, by himself in the dark, when suddenly he'd felt something lean up against his side and on his shoulder. We were all witness to the fact that nobody else was in contact with him, and that his left side was clear of any coaches or other objects in the shed. Mark found this too frightening, as he had already been grabbed by the entity quite a few times since first entering the coach house. It was apparent that this unseen entity was picking on him. We could pick up nothing on film, EMF, or anything else at this time. Since I, Rowena, wasn't bothered by the entity, I was the one who then walked behind everyone, with Mark in front of me, giving protection to Mark from the unseen annoyance he was experiencing and that was terrifying him so much.
A Reddit user visited 9 years ago and wrote, "We arrived at the house at about 3, and we were the first there, so we were told to wander around and get settled in for the next hour or so. This is where it got creepy. Standing at the front of the homestead, to the left there is a gift shop, nowhere as old as a house. We took a few pics of the mansion. I wandered over to the left of the veranda and took a pic of the gift shop. When we arrived, the tour guide said to take pics of windows because that's where they like to show up. I didn't believe this, but did it anyway."
And apparently that's where they are the spirits.
Right. So I zoomed into the gift shop's window, and just as my finger touched the camera button, a little girl's head popped up in the window. This gave me a mini heart attack. I jokingly told my dad that I thought she was a ghost for a second, but later found out from our tour guide that her name is Molly, one of the previous young maids who died around 100 years ago. She haunts the property with many other ghosts.
So then somebody asked her on one of the comments, well, do you have the picture? And she did. And look, Kelly.
Whoa. That really looks like a flesh and blood little girl.
Yeah, I mean, looking at this, I'd say, okay, there was a child in the shop and she's looking out.
Definitely. That's exactly what it looks like.
When you get closer to it, though, she's not as clear as the house around it. So she's, like all these ghost pictures, has a little bit of the kind of blur to it. I would think she would have looked a little bit more detailed if it was a real child. She had some people ask if this could be a doll, because, they like to go with the creep factor. So maybe they put a doll in the window, or there was a visiting child who was wandering around the gift shop and looked out the window. So she did ask about a doll, and she did look around for a doll, and there was nothing in the window. She took a few pictures while she was inside as well to kind of show that there weren't any children here. She looked at the guest book, and all the people from that day were just couples, no children. The only child that had turned up according to the guest book was a 2-year-old boy. And she said, and I can 99% say it wasn't a doll, as it just looked so real. And that's why I initially thought nothing of it until I brought it up at dinner. And it does look like the size of a child who would be standing in the window, not a doll.
Right.
The lady at the gift shop also swears that besides the little boy, absolutely no children came in.
And a 2-year-old wouldn't be tall enough to be looking out like that anyway.
No, and I mean, it's clearly a girl. You can see that it has a little dress on, and because you could just see it kind of from the chest up. I will post some pictures on Instagram.
Amy Brooks is the director of the Monte Cristo documentary series, and the website featuring the series said in 2023, Amy Brooks, the director, took on the brave task of staying in the house alone during pre-production. And it was during this time that she had many strange experiences that set the tone for the rest of the shoot. One of the most notable experiences Amy had was hearing a disembodied voice telling her, "Good luck," after a camera malfunctioned.
I don't think it was actually wishing her luck.
Yeah, I think maybe a drip of sarcasm there.
Yeah, good luck with that.
The camera immediately turned back on after the voice was heard, adding to the eerie atmosphere.
So maybe they weren't so upset about the documentary.
Just letting her know that they're there. This was just one of many instances where the crew experienced paranormal activity. Before a paranormal encounter, the room would often drop in temperature, and the crew would feel as if they were being watched. Many reported feeling an overwhelming presence, adding to the spooky atmosphere. Interestingly, despite the many paranormal encounters, the spirits of the house largely left the film equipment alone. This could be attributed to the fact that the documentary crew was respectful towards the spirits and not trying to fabricate paranormal evidence. Filming was tough. More than once, crew members had to leave because the feelings in the house were too intense. Several had come as skeptics, and all seemed to have paranormal encounters.
The last thing that I saw posted from this documentary's Instagram was back in August of 2023. So we're getting into summer of 2024 now, so I don't know if putting the series together, it's just taken them this long to get that done. So it's not up anywhere yet. So Claire Walters visited in February 2024, and she writes on her Canberra website, Mrs. Crowley ruled Monte Cristo with a firm hand, and it's recommended you greet Mrs. Crowley when you enter, lest she decides to dislike you, which can happen if you're A, rude, B, not fashionable enough wearing a hat, or C, an unmarried young man.
Okay.
I feel safe and enjoy strong feminine vibes the whole tour, whilst my very skeptical partner feels like he's pushed out of a room at one point.
Oh, wow.
That's what you get for being a young man, apparently.
Are the spirits of servants and others still haunting the halls of Monte Cristo? Is Reg still keeping an eye on the place from the afterlife? Do things really go bump in the night and day at Monte Cristo?
That is for you to decide. It's just a great place to go and take pictures. I just think it is such a gorgeous Victorian. So unique with those double verandas and that cast iron. And it's all painted, so it's not like black. It's very colorful.
Beautiful.
I want to thank you guys for joining us for this Redux. I've been your host, Diane.
And this has been Kelly.
You take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.